Hey Earthlings. Today we are in Huehuecoyotl community, one of the community that's been here for 40 years. It's one of the oldest community in Mexico here, and we saw third generation members living here on this beautiful land. And today we have our friend Tonia, who has so much wisdom and so much experience to share with us, and we have some juicy questions for her. So first I want to ask you like how this community started.
We were a traveling, performing theater family of people from 10 countries who had been on the move for many years in ambulatory vehicles. And that group had started from a few Mexicans who were leaving a very difficult situation in 1968 when there was a huge massacre of labor and protest youth. And basically, these Mexicans went in search of themselves, traveling around the world like people in that era did. We didn't know at the time about peak oil and how that would be contributing to the transportation and fuel difficulties that later on became really evident. However, passing more than 30 countries and learning different things as a kind of Gurdjieffian journey, different people from different countries were attracted to this colorful group. And by the time we returned to Mexico, we were 15 grown-ups and 13 children. And we were on tour with very small, minimal, marginal contracts here in Mexico for 2 years in more than 15 states, performing in Spanish, things that we had created with our kids, and decided to put down some roots. So we were able to find a piece of land that was very magical for us. And we didn't know at the time that the traditional Nahuatl name of the community, of the mountains here, was actually the name of the god of culture, poetry, dancing, music, painting, all the things that we had spent our lives doing. So, for one thing, I wouldn't call myself an expert on community living. I've only been at it for 50 years.
Only 50 years.
I lived also in esoteric Gurdjieffian commune in Northern California in the Redwoods during the 70s, which was the Back to the Land movement. So I also have some experience visiting other communities. But I still feel like I'm in diapers compared to indigenous communities which have lasted together for more than 10,000 years in many parts of the world.
I want to ask you also what makes you stay here.
Communities have their ups and downs. A lot depends on the chemistry between the group and the chemistry between the kids and the chemistry between the animals and the relationship that you have to the surrounding villages, wherever you are, and your ability to adapt and change with the growth spurts of the children, the animals, and the adults. And I think that beginning to do some personal work of my own about 25 years ago enabled me to have a lot more tolerance than when one just sticks to the ideal of gardening together and raising your kids together, making an alternative school, a food co-op, and all this. I think it really takes doing some personal work on yourself because we all carry frozen injuries from our childhood that we're subconsciously cleaning in relationship to all the other members of the community. And whether we admit it or not, that is taking place all the time. So having a willingness to look at our stuff, some of which is not very pretty, and some of it are frozen needs that never got fulfilled, is, I think, an essential element. What has held this particular community together are many things. The creativity, which was our forte in life, and the freedom. We are not obligated to be here. And so even though it has been difficult for some people who've stayed all the time here, to manage the care of the place when many people were gone or out or visiting their home countries or their parents or family or other missions that they had in life. This freedom allowed each person to live their mission in life fully. And that, I think, is a very important element.
Yeah, definitely.
There are times when either looking at yourself or seeing clearly some of the flaws that your neighbors have is hard to take, and one might want to throw in the towel. There's also the capacity to regenerate, whether it's by means of doing the personal work yourself, on yourself, about why you're so triggered, and the capacity to be creative in the group itself, to continue doing things together, to have socialization and creative projects that you do together, and process those challenges in your life, compost them, turn them into something that you begin to understand.
Yeah.
It's kind of, for me, it's kind of like when people become in a situation of divorce and they don't understand what happened. And finally, if they finally understand what happened, it hurts a lot less.
Yeah.
So I would encourage anybody thinking of community to engage in some kind of personal work that outside of the community, where they can really take a serious look confidentially at the stuff they're carrying to this big soup, which is the energy you make together.
Yeah, definitely. Inner work is the most important thing, in my opinion, as well. Yeah. Would you like to give us like an example of a conflict that happened and how did you resolve it?
There are many conflicts that remain unresolved, and not every conflict pertains to the whole group to resolve. At times, it's something that two families or two individuals need to work out. It's only when it really affects the whole community that the rest of the people take it on as something that we need to speak about. In that sense, we don't have a group think, and our financial situation is divided so that we have group monies and individual family monies and economies, and we only use our assembly meetings to talk about things that pertain to the group.
So you leave individual conflict to be solved in between the two parties, and whatever concerns the community, if the conflict is affecting the community, then it's solved in the community setting.
Well, I wouldn't say it gets solved in the community
Or
setting,
try.
but it's brought for discussion if it affects everyone in the community.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to have private space and have limits and boundaries between what pertains to the community and what is their own business. So we don't have a leader in our group. We're all very strong leaders, each one of us. So we always believed in a more egalitarian form of decision making, and in terms of a conflict, there are many things that come up in consensus decision making meetings where there may be, it seems, two individuals who have something that's creating a friction, and actually that represents two camps of thought within the community. It's not usually just two people. So in that sense, there are themes that need to be taken up in the group because it does represent two different camps of thought. There are many times in consensus decision making that if a proposal for an idea comes up and one person sees that it puts the whole group in some aspect of danger or risk, and they want to block the proposal, which should happen very few times in the lifetime of a community, there is the space to be heard with consensus decision making. There should be some space in sociocracy also for that kind of introspection and hearing of questions.
Yeah.
But I found that in consensus decision making, if it's practiced formally and respectfully and accurately,
Mm-hmm.
it leaves less room for majority rule to take over.
Mm.
And I can think of many situations that have come up in the consensus period of time that we used that as a means of decision making. Then we also tried to learn sociocracy, and now we've come full circle to what I consider a big mistake, which is using majority rule.
Mm.
So if a great construction idea is planned for an area that actually in permaculture is considered zone 5, an untouchable area, and everybody wants to do it except one person says, hey, you know, we say that we're seeking permaculture values. How can we possibly consider that if the only zone 5 we have is where the rest of you want to build this huge tank?
Mm.
So there's a lot of hours that goes into hearing out people if you take the decision to have consensus as your form of decision making.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the case that people who are excellent at conflict transformation
Mm.
are totally welcome
Yeah.
at all times in community.
Mm-hmm.
We've had several visits from people from Windhorn, from the Zeg community in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
from a community in Denmark, all of which were people who were doing excellent conflict transformation sessions, both individually with us and as a group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a rare skill
Definitely.
that
Yeah.
is maybe too much overlooked when people are thinking about community.
Mm-hmm.
One needs to have, maybe not on site, someone who is a real professional, conflict transformation professional,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely access to that kind of teaching, because it's not something that comes naturally to people.
Yeah, we have never learned it in schools or any educational part unless we are really focused on wanting to improve our relationship.
Yeah, and actually most people look upon friction as a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to make the shift over to seeing that it's an opportunity for growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if the people are totally in agreement that they want to grow and they're willing to humble themselves at times to a process of conflict transformation,
Mm.
then I think your community has a better chance.
So it boiled down to finding a way to communicate in a productive way that include each person's perspective and come back with a reward for everybody. So nobody is neglected and the good for all is part of the decision making and part of the process.
Yes, and I would like to underscore that it's often only transformation of conflicts. It's not always solution of conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
It means you can move from one stubborn position a little bit to another position.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that needs to be made. That distinction needs to be made. None of us imagined that we were going to grow old together.
Mm.
We were in our 30s. We were full of vim and vigor, and that's what happened. We grew old.
Wow.
And I think that one needs to plan for eldership early on so that those who are on the hillside way up also have a place they can live when they get to be in their 80s. And those who are children at the time have a place for their youthful adolescence, that it's not overlooked as a place where the youth want to gather.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even if there's enough space for the younger ones to have their own space when they get older, and maybe they do want to live in the community. Oftentimes they don't, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they do.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And Your community is one of very few community who we saw the third generation here. We get to meet some kids who are the kids of one of the founder, which is really fantastic, and yeah, brings a lot of hope in me.
Yeah, and also it's important to remind people that living in community is not always the whole life of every person who lives in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, it's only a part of their lives.
Yeah.
Perhaps they want to study Bharatanatyam dance in India for many years, and that's a big part of their mission in life. And the community living is only a part
Mm-hmm.
of that dream. So I think it's important to remember that not everybody comes to living in community with the same uh, percentage of interest
Mm-hmm.
or willingness to row the boat in the same way, or that this is the full life that they want to live. Some people, this is only a part of their lives.
That's beautiful to see that you can actually, like, the perception of it doesn't have to be all your life. Like, you can still come in, do your part, follow your calling, go wherever you want, and then come back when you feel the calling again.
Yes, there are times in which some of us have stayed away, called to do other things
Mm-hmm.
for years.
Yeah.
And as long as we maintain that thread and the commitments that we have economically, we can re-enter into the community life
Mm-hmm.
without missing a beat. One of the caravans was on the road to the tip of South America for 13 years. I was also gone for 5 years, filming in different war zones of the world because the U.S. political policies drove me to
Mm.
use the camera work to see and hear and share with people what other people couldn't see and hear, actually stepping into those zones. So some people went to the North Pole to make circles with Mongolian shamans, and other people did other things. So
Mm-hmm.
we always had this attitude of coming back home and inviting everybody over for some wine and cheese and share what we saw and heard when
Mm-hmm.
we went to the four directions.
So if you follow our channel, we have made a video about why community fail, and we give 9 reasons why we experience community failing. And since we have special guests today, I want to ask you about your opinion, your perspective. Why do you see community fail? And yeah, you can share from your
Hmm.
experience.
I think communities are only part of a web of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Intentional communities are not the only way to live community, and people can create transition towns in areas where communities that are diverse already exist
Mm-hmm.
and raise up the awareness of a whole village, starting with preschool all the way up, and create community in a different sense. I think living together all in the same place is not the only measurement
Mm-hmm.
for the success of a community. And there are probably many places where they're doing it better than we do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think also we had many years on the road together,
Mm-hmm.
which is a project in and of itself.
It's an actual community living off-road, on
Yeah,
road.
yeah. And so we were all taking care of all the kids at the same time, doing theater all together. The kids even had made up their own theater programs that were part of our show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the kids were happy. They said, we have 6 moms and 6 dads. And their artwork shows that they were quite happy. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
a life school on the road for them, which was fascinating, to live in deserts and live in jungles
Mm-hmm.
and learn what that means actually in the physical reality of your day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And having some project that you do together
Mm-hmm.
before you're all living in the same place is a very valuable experience,
Mm-hmm.
because then you find out who you're living with and what their orientation is. Or if you don't really know the people for many years,
Mm-hmm.
you can have heart sharing circles and talk about very difficult subjects and have an agreement not to debate,
Mm-hmm.
but simply to hear the opinion of the other people with no discussion and no debate, but just a limited time to speak their mind about a certain subject, and that way get to know people.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many ways that people come together. Oftentimes, what brings you together can change.
Mm.
You may feel that you're devoted to a certain food practice, and that's your cause célèbre in life. And you may find out over time that there's some shifts that need to be made in your lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
in order to deal with your health. And so you can start out thinking that you're all on the same page, but things may change as time goes on
Yeah.
for one or the other, or a couple,
Mm-hmm.
or whomever. So I think this brings me to the subject which we were talking about today, which is in this particular community, which has lasted for 40 years here, and then of course we know each other for 10 years before that,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't anybody who is dogmatically devoted to their religion of origin.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that everybody wants to go into the sweat lodge. Not everybody does. But not being dogmatically attached to any particular religion or way of life
Mm-hmm.
enables people to work things out.
Mm-hmm.
It's true that we're becoming a world full of extremes, and people are taking positions
Mm-hmm.
right and left on almost everything, and there's a tremendous amount of division.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, these things need to be talked about. And if those things are talked about in a forum that allows for respect and diversity and tolerance, patience, differences of opinion,
Mm-hmm.
without people feeling attacked or that there'll be reprisals or any
Mm-hmm.
such thing, I think any group, whether they're working together or they're living together, has a much better chance of being able to survive these great divisions we're all facing. I think that living in community allows people to benefit from the wisdom of your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
There's always somebody who's in some kind of crisis, and the other people rally around that and can help out with whatever pearls of wisdom they have or whatever experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then it shifts. And that's how it makes it possible to raise a family and have children and deal with all the things that come up in that story
Mm.
that enables living together with other people who you trust to be a valuable and rich experience along the way as emergencies in life come up,
Mm-hmm.
especially during the teenage years when your kids tend to be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the collective wisdom, when you ask for it, is a useful and meaningful experience. And also keeping your own rudder,
Mm.
knowing how to keep your own boundaries and hear other people's opinions, but follow your own intuition in life as well. Cultivate your own experience,
Mm-hmm.
treasure trove,
Yeah.
and listen but not be swayed by what other people may think about a particular issue. I think humor. I think humor and having fun, if you're not having fun, nobody's going to want to do it. So
Yeah.
it's not enough
Mm-hmm.
to just be digging in the garden together.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some aspect of joy, celebration, playfulness, humor, partying, being fun-loving.
Yeah.
I think all of that contributes to life's passing in a beautiful way.
This is one of a learning lesson actually we had in our like experimenting living with friends and creating foundation for a community, that we noticed at some point that the fun part is missing, and I was like, oh, okay, how we can like invite this again and not be a lot focused on shadow work, for example. So yeah.
I think when we were on the road traveling and we were going through many situations that were new through South America, there's wars you're passing through and all. um, there's no perfect profile of a community member,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no perfect people, and there's no perfect kids, and there's no perfect animals. So I think genuine playfulness
Mm-hmm.
that really comes from surrender to life and all of its surprises
Yeah.
is part of the glue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. There are times when I was not very in the mood to be smiling at people when there were big traumas going on,
Mm.
and I don't believe in that kind of false celebrations.
Yeah.
However, sometimes it is true. If you put a smile on your face and you go into the fray, sometimes it can help you to let go of your own stubbornness and your own attachment to whatever it is that you
Mm-hmm.
are feeling triggered about. And learning to let go is a big, it's a
Mm-hmm.
biggie in everybody's life.
Another thing that we are facing a lot right now, that there is many people from Europe, from the USA, are coming to either Ecuador or Mexico, and they're creating like subculture and not really integrating with the locals. So how did you manage it in your community, and what would you advise new community member and founders and visionaries?
You can't relate if you don't speak the language of the people where you are nestled. Just being a good person is not enough. You need to demonstrate that you're going to meet people halfway so that anything you do offer, you're offering on the terms that are understandable
Mm-hmm.
by the people where you're living. As I said before, communities are only one element of a big spider's web of relationships with farmers, with local people, with townspeople,
Mm-hmm.
with activists, with people who have a different agenda than you. And first of all, you must speak the language so that you know what people are speaking and that they can understand you. And I think that's a step that's sorely overlooked, especially in these very anxious times of mm, refugees of all different kinds from all different economic classes
Mm-hmm.
moving into ethnic societies because they can and because they have the money to buy into those places. It's not always welcomed, and especially the numbers of people who are coming now is quite a jolt for many communities,
Mm-hmm.
especially here in Latin America. And of course, when we came here, we all spoke Spanish, and in our school, our alternative school, we taught Nahuatl. We had the elders of Nahuatl teaching the kids Nahuatl, not teaching English, until that changed.
Mm.
But taking off your shoes and putting your feet on the ground, finding out where you are without imposing your values of, corporate Europe, you might say,
Mm-hmm.
on the place where you're coming and expecting people to pay you with the same value, or understanding the give and take of these communities, which is not based on money. It's often based on barter. It's often based on trade, energy trade.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not appropriate to come zooming into a local village with your four-wheel drive late model car, jump out and buy a few things and get back in. If you're piercing a community that way, naturally you will get a little bit of pushback. But if you come into an area more like in a spiral, like in indigenous communities, the conch shell is a spiral inside. You don't just penetrate into a community. You come in slowly and gradually at a walking pace and see where it is you fit in and where it is you don't fit in, and are you imposing to put yourself in a situation,
Mm-hmm.
or are you being welcomed by a certain group of people or one individual. These are all things you need to be able to analyze so that
Mm-hmm.
you're not penetrating a place and producing the possibility of pushback.
Mm-hmm. That require a lot of integration with the feminine energy, like coming and tuning to the place and finding how people feel about you. And yeah, I want to ask you, like, how do you build this bridge? Like, is there like an advice or like a practical solution or a practical advice of how to build this harmonious connection with the locals?
Observe.
Mm-hmm.
Be an observant person. You don't need to be talking hasta los codos, no, until your elbows all the time. And observe how people relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And observe, be receptive, humble yourself. You don't need to always be the protagonist in a group. When you enter a room, learn how to be invisible, learn how to blend in, to be harmonious or useful in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And understand your own paternalism, your own attitudes of racism, your own unfolding of your attitudes about the other.
Mm-hmm.
And learn to observe and not jump in to things.
Yeah.
Blend rather than pierce, is what I would say.
Yeah. I have no word to say. It's very wise. A lot of wisdom.
Oh, I've made a lot of mistakes.
I myself stayed here with you for almost a week, and in this interview I learned a lot. So thank you for your wisdom and sharing with us and teaching us a lot of things. And I want to open the stage for you if you want to share a final word with our community.
There's always more, and just know that we're still all in diapers.
And if you want to see more from Tonia, she has also an amazing interview with Derick Prose, and you will find the link in the description. And you can also see our videos about community living, and in the future we'll be visiting more communities and interview more community founder and community members. So make sure to subscribe and click the notification. And if you have any questions for us or for Tonia, please leave it in the comment below. And we see you in the next one. Bye bye.
Thank you.